I was trying to think of a more cringe and crazy intro than "What's up, my skibbity rizzlers," but I honestly couldn't think of anything. But either way, now that I have your attention, welcome back to another Asphalt Legends Unite video, and today we are taking a look at the Icona Volcano Titanium. This is, in my opinion, probably the most underrated and underused cars in current multiplayer meta for this game. I'll go over the reasons why, but this is also going to be an episode of Old But Gold. This is the series where I go ahead and take a look at some of the oldest cars in Asphalt Legends Unite. We take them out of the garage, take off all the rust, and give them a spin in modern multiplayer to see how well they handle. And like I said, today we're going to take a look at the Icona. This is one of the lower end S-Class cars, and you'll probably unlock this car pretty early on into your Asphalt career, but like I said before, I think this is super underrated and underutilized. So if you have this car sitting in your garage and you're at Gold League, I think you should take it out for a spin. Alright, so what makes this car so good in multiplayer? Well, firstly, where can you get this car? You can get this car at Gold League 3. So not platinum, but also not at the very top range of gold. So if you're a pretty competent player, you'll get access to this car in multiplayer pretty quickly. You can also find this car to unlock it in normal S-Class packs. So every week you can go ahead and play that daily event, and eventually you should be able to get this car pretty quickly. Again, it's also one of the oldest cars in the game. I think it was one of the cars added on release. So it's not like this car came in an update. This was one of the default cars. So it's very, very old. And again, I think it's super underutilized. So when you get this car in Gold 3, you're talking about competitions such as really high-end B-Class cars and also some pretty good A-Class cars. And sitting right next to it in terms of rank is the VLF Force 1 V10, which is a really good A-Class car and has some really good stats for it as well. But even if you compare it to the Icona, it doesn't look that different on paper, yet in the game it is so different, and that's mainly due to the handling. When we talk about handling for A-Class cars, there is a huge difference between those cars and S-Class cars. Now, once you get up into the very high top ranked A-Class cars, it definitely gets a little bit better compared to the mid-range ones, but they typically lose a lot of their speed any type of time you try and do a drift. Now with the S-Class cars, they're all very different from each other, but for the most part, you aren't going to lose that much speed in a drift. And the Icona definitely has that S-Class characteristic of drifting, even though the stat is not that different and actually worse than some of the higher end A-Class cars. In my opinion, that's what makes this car so usable in multiplayer, and in this video, you'll see me use the Icona all the way to get to Platinum League. So if you're lacking some of those higher Gold League cars, like in Gold 1 or Gold 2, but you do have the Icona, like I said, I think this is really underrated, and you can definitely use this only to get to Platinum. This was actually the only car that I used for last season to get all the way through to Platinum. So we've established that the handling is really good and much better than a vast majority of the A-Class cars. Again, that's what makes it pretty good, especially in those twistier tracks where you'd think that this car doesn't really have a chance against something like a Huracan or a Corvette, but if you know how to handle it pretty well and you do some brake nitro tricks to sort of pop your wheel in the corner, or you can do some floaty drifts with this car, it can definitely compete with those cars, especially because this next point is the top speed. Even though the handling isn't like crazy like the Corvettes or the Huracans that you might find in Gold League, you can definitely outrun them in the straightaways with the well above 240 mph top speed, which again, comparing it to A-Class cars, you're talking about competition with the very, very best, like the Imolas and the Valkyries, or maybe the Valhalla. Anyway, they're the same name. Anyway, the high-end A-Class cars are only where you're going to find above 240 mph top speeds, and that's exactly where this car sits. So once you start competition with the S-Class cars like the Lycan, or especially something like the Tryon, that's where this car falls off, especially in Platinum League. But in Gold League, you aren't really going to find anything else with such a high top speed. The only one real downside to this car is the acceleration, and I'm not going to call it a downside, it's more or less just something that balances this car out. Now at max, or at the rank that I have it at, the current acceleration stat is 81.38, and in my opinion, if you want to have something decently competitive in multiplayer, at the very minimum, it has to be above 80. And so that's where this car sits. You're not getting that 84, 85 acceleration that you get with some of the electric cars or some of those very high-end B-class cars, but it's definitely good enough to hold its own against some of those other cars. You are going to find yourself starting in maybe 3rd, 4th, or behind the pack at the very beginning of certain races, but like I said, that top speed is really going to help you out, especially against something like the Huracan or the Vanda, where you are going a solid 20 plus miles per hour above those cars' top speed. Last but not least, we will talk about Nitro. It's at, I believe, 65.36, which is pretty good. It's not anything crazy like a Vanda, like a Huracan, like a Corvette, but also when you talk about S-Class cars, you talk about Nitro stats in the 30s and the 40s. So again, even though this doesn't have the 290 miles per hour of something like a Regera or any of those super high-end S-Class cars, the nitro efficiency is definitely above average, even for some of those better A-class cars as well. So because of that nitro efficiency, you can use Shockwave to get all the way up to your top speed most of the time. That is unlike all of the other high-end S-Class cars. Like I said, it's not the competition for this car, but you think about the 30 and 40 stats for those cars, you're not getting anywhere close to your top speed if you're accelerating from under 200 miles per hour. Whereas with the Icona, because the efficiency is so good, you can stay in Shockwave for a very long time. That'll also help you protect yourself if knockdowns are enabled. Again, it's not going to be as crazy as a Shockwave in a Huracan or a Vanda or something like that, but it is so refreshing with an S-Class car to have a decently usable Shockwave time compared to the other S-Class cars, and like I said, even some of those higher end A-Class cars. So like I've been saying throughout this video, Gold League is where this car shines. That's where you get access to the car in multiplayer, and you can totally use this to only get all the way up to Platinum. Like I said, for the previous season, I used this car exclusively. So even though in this video, you're obviously not going to see every single race that I got, I will show you guys the race that I did make it to Platinum League, and it did do very good in getting me to Platinum League. Like I've been saying throughout this video as well, once you start competing against the very high-end A-Class cars like your Imolas or like the Ford, you're going to have a little bit of a tough time. It's not because this car is that bad compared to those other cars. It is just because some of the aspects, like the different stats that this car has, becomes average rather than above average. Alright, so as we near the end of the video, let's just sort of go over everything in a nutshell. Firstly, the top speed is well above average considering that this is in Gold League. Again, once you get to Platinum League, you may struggle against other S-Class cars, but for Gold League and getting to that Platinum League area, this is going to be extremely good, especially on those top speed tracks like Himalayas and Cairo. In terms of the acceleration, it's just above 81, which isn't great, but it also isn't bad. You're still going to be relatively competitive. In terms of handling, this is far better than a vast majority of the other A-Class cars you're going to see. Like I said, the main comparison point being the VLF. That handling definitely slows you down in that car, whereas in this car, not only does it have some of those floaty characteristics that you can use if you're a skilled player, but also in general, you're going to maintain your top speed throughout the corners compared to other cars. Lastly, talking about the nitro efficiency, again, if you're going to compare it to something like a Vanda or a Huracan, you're going to be disappointed. But if you compare it against other high-end A-Class cars or those middle-of-the-range S-Class cars, this is well above average. It means that you can use Shockwave to get up to your top speed pretty much throughout any corner, so it's a good way to get up to that 240 plus mile per hour range where you are going significantly faster than many of the other B and A-Class cars you're going to go up against. So really, the only downside in this car is those really short tracks that are also kind of twisty, sometimes like those Buenos Aires tracks, where unfortunately there isn't a lot you can do against a Huracan. If you're a very skilled player, you can definitely know how to get around that sort of thing, but if you're an average player throughout Gold League, this car is going to be good for the vast majority of tracks, but you do have to look out every once in a while. So anyway guys, that's going to wrap up this video on the Icona Volcano Titanium, one of the most underrated and underutilized cars in current Asphalt multiplayer. I've definitely enjoyed using it, and even though after this video, of course, I'm not going to solely use this car in Gold League, it is definitely the car on my short list that I'm going to gravitate to when I'm trying to get to Platinum League. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts about this car in the comment section down below. Let me know also if you have any other recommendations for old but gold. I always like looking at some of those cars that we may have forgotten, and I will catch you all in the next one.